Even for those of us who live and breathe tech, trying to cut through all the specs, all the marketing noise, it can feel like a real quest sometimes, right? Especially finding a component that really stands out. So today, we're doing just that. A deep dive focused on one specific card that's been getting some attention. The XFX Wind-Buffed RX 9060 XT OC White triple fan, 16 gigs, and that OC means it's overclocked right out of the box, so, a bit of an edge there. Our mission today. Let's unpack a detailed review of this card, see what makes it a strong option, who it's really for, and all those little details you should know. Whether you're thinking of buying or you're just tech curious, think of this as your shortcut to getting properly informed about a pretty significant piece of kit.
And what's interesting about the review we're looking at is how it frames the card. It's not just about raw specs, but this phrase they use, a delightful blend of form and function. It suggests, well, a more complete picture, doesn't it?
Okay, let's start then with that first impression. And honestly, with this card, it's the look. It's pretty striking. That all-white shroud, the three fans, it gives off a very modern vibe, crisp, minimalist. It's definitely a choice, moving away from, the really flashy RGB everywhere. For a lot of people building clean PCs, that's actually a big plus.
Yeah, and the review points out this design isn't just skin deep, it's practical. Even with three fans, it's apparently quite compact for what it is. XFX seems to have put thought into the layout, making sure air flows freely, which is crucial. You've got the full backplate, those clean vents, small details, but they add up. Makes it look really neat, especially for those white builds.
Right. So if you're picturing that kind of build, sleek, understated, maybe lets the games do the talking. What really stands out to you about this design approach? It feels quite specific. But looks aren't everything, are they? Let's get under the hood. This is where it gets really interesting, the power and efficiency side. So it's factory overclocked, game clocks hitting 2,780 megahertz, boosts up to 3,320 megahertz, which, the review notes, is around 10% higher than AMD's own reference spec. That's not insignificant.
And even with that boost, the power draw is pretty sensible. The total board power, or TDP, is around 180 watts. Okay, that's a little over reference, but still quite modest. It shouldn't really tax most mid-range power supplies. And, crucially for builders, just needs one 8-pin power connector. That really helps keep the cables tidy. So it strikes a nice balance, really. Good performance, but still efficient for the kind of PC it's likely going into.
Okay, let's talk gaming, the real-world stuff. The review really emphasizes that this card punches well above its weight for the price. At 1080p and 1440p, it's apparently running neck and neck with Nvidia's RTX 5060 Ti quite often.
Yeah.
Sometimes just a fraction behind, but in some games, even pulling slightly ahead. They specifically mention F124 as an example, where it often leads, especially if you enable AMD's upscaling tech.
Right, and even pushing it to 4K, which, let's be honest, isn't its main playground of performance, is still described as commendable, provided you're willing to maybe dial back a few settings or lean on that AMD Fidelity FX upscaling. And here's a fascinating detail from the testing they mentioned. With upscaling turned on, it can close the performance gap significantly, sometimes even beating the RTX 5060 outright in those scenarios. Which really speaks to how important upscaling is becoming in modern gaming, doesn't it? Getting those higher frame rates without a huge visual hit.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, thinking about value overall, this card has something pretty smart going for it. 16 gigabytes of GDDR6 VRAM. A lot of competitors in this sort of mid-range space, they often stick with 8 gigs. So what does all that extra memory really mean for you as a gamer, maybe looking a year or two down the line?
Well, fundamentally, it means better future-proofing. Simple as that. As games get more complex, textures get richer, resolutions climb. Having more VRAM stops the card from hitting a memory bottleneck, which translates to smoother gameplay, especially if you like using high-res texture mods or as future games just demand more.
And when you look at the price, the review mentions street prices often around £300, maybe £350. That's 16 GB VRAM combined with the performance we just talked about.
Yeah.
It really makes a strong case for value, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It feels like a very deliberate strategic move from XFX in a really competitive part of the market.
Okay, so it's powerful for its class, good value. But a graphics card also needs to, well, keep its cool. And do it without sounding like a jet engine. The review gives XFX's cooling solution high marks. That triple fan setup, the heat pipes, the fin stack, apparently does a stellar job.
Yeah, the specifics they mention are pretty good. Even under heavy load, temperatures seem to stay in the low to mid 70s Celsius, comfortable range. And crucially, the noise stays low. It's described as being quietly in the background, never intrusive, which is huge for immersion, right?
Yeah.
A cool, quiet card just makes for a much nicer gaming experience overall.
Now, no card is perfect. The review does flag a couple of, let's say, minor caveats. First, it mentions that AMD's software side, specifically things like ray tracing performance and their AI upscaling features, isn't quite as mature or polished as Nvidia's ecosystem yet.
That's a fair assessment, generally speaking. And the other point is about aesthetics. That clean white design is great for many, but the total lack of RGB lighting. Oh, if you want that flashy, customizable look, this card just doesn't offer it. And one last practical thing. While it's compact for a triple fan card, it's still, a triple fan card. So it's worth double checking your case has enough space and good airflow to really let it breathe properly.
Yeah, good points. But for the target audience, these feel more like known trade-offs you accept to get the other benefits, rather than major flaws. All right, so let's try and boil this deep dive down. The core findings paint the XFX Swift RX 9060 XDOC as, well, a smart choice. It's stylish in its own way, performs really well for a mid-range card, especially at 1080p and 1440p, often keeping pace with pricier options. You get that generous VRAM, good cooling, reasonable power needs, and that understated look. It seems very well-rounded.
It's exactly. The review really zeroes in on who this is for. If your budget is mid-tier and you value quiet operation, solid capability, and that clean aesthetic, this XFX card becomes very hard to ignore. Especially, as we said, if you're doing a white build or just trying to squeeze the most performance out of every pound or dollar.
So wrapping this up, here's something to think about, building on what the review touched on. We know graphics tech moves incredibly fast. What does that future-proofing from the 16 GB of VRAM really mean in practice for a gamer who wants their card to last, say, not just 1 year, but maybe 3 or 4? How much longevity does it actually buy you?